Hi, it's Leila, the proud poly kinky queer slut. Today's question is, why do gay people make being gay the centerpiece of their identity? I have been diving into queer history. And one thing that I find very interesting is that until the 19th and 20th centuries, the concept of being gay as an identity was not structured anywhere near what it is today. So people had same-sex attractions and they had same-sex relationships, but they did not, as in general, define themselves primarily by who they wanted to have sex with. That was primarily defined, other factors were more important. I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a professional, I'm a mother. Those would be more key, like social roles would be more of a key factor. We know that there have been gay people and people who are queer in all different ways throughout all of history. And there are some great podcasts and queer history things on this. So I'm not going to give lots of specific references, but the History is Gay podcast is great. Queer as Fact is another one. There are some really good TV shows popping up now that give overviews of queer history, going back to ancient Egypt, Greece, China. So there's a lot of information out there if you want to go look for it about just, how people like us have always existed. But until fairly recently, we didn't identify ourselves as a group based on the fact that we were sexually attracted to the same gender. There is a term that I've come across recently that I didn't know before, and I think I may have mentioned it on a previous video, but it's homohysteria, which is funny to me. It's a funny word, but so society in the Victorian era in the 19th, 20th centuries started really cracking down on this morality clause of society, this moralism, and vilifying queer people, vilifying people for being attracted to the same gender. And there are some interesting things around this, around like the trial of Oscar Wilde and people being really persecuted for being gay. As a backlash to that, this carries forward to today, including the Christian movements of the 80s and, all of this vilification of queer culture. But this carried forward, and this hatred of queerness, of gayness, really created this vortex around people needing to come together around this for self-protection, for support, to not feel alone, to not be ostracized by community. And that's, in a nutshell, why we have the queer culture we do today and why people identify based on sexual orientation as a core identity marker. And it's largely because that's what we were ostracized for, what we were pushed out of our communities for. That's what we were told we're not okay. So, society did not, go out of its way to vilify, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's an equivalent characteristic. So for example, I am if I'm 5'2". History did not go out of its way to say being short is horrible. If you're too short, you better account for that. You better put on your platform shoes. You better pass as tall, or you might face criminal trials, and you might not be able to hold a job, and you might lose your family. That's on the face of it ridiculous. Another one might be, you do not like sweet foods. You do not like candy. That's just too weird for me. I can't take it. I'm going to bring you up on charges of not supporting the sugar industry, of tearing apart your family by liking too many vegetables. This is ludicrous, but these are inherent things that have not been vilified about us. So I can have my sweet tooth and nobody cares. But or not, or I could like my salad and nobody cares. But the fact that I want to have sex with women, this presents problems in our culture for a lot of people. So we have banded together, looking at the big sociological arc. There's a good argument anyway. I'm not saying 100% this is the case, but there's a good argument that the reason why queer culture has banded together the way it has, and especially gay culture has banded together the way it has, is because that was an aspect of our personalities that was under attack and that needed defense and that needed the support of the group. So I just find that fascinating, that like the social pressures that want to erase us are exactly what make us now stand up and shout from the rooftops that this is what we are, because that's how we counter that. And I always like taking the long look at history, looking at the arc of history over, not a decade or two, but over a century or two or five or a millennia or two. And it's very interesting to me to see how that ebbs and flows. And, side note, there is a lot of stuff out there in those queer podcasts and history research about how shutting down queer identity was a bid for control and a way of keeping control over people by reinforcing the patriarchy. So just throwing that nugget in there. It's or vilifying the queer people so that people look the other way and don't see you committing atrocities against other people. And I'm just going to say that right now, as I'm making this video here in the spring of 2025, I see that happening. I see vilification of queer people so that people focus on that instead of focusing on people being rounded up and deported. I see that happening. So just calling attention to that. But anyway, yeah, I find it really fascinating. And thank you very much for listening. This is Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. Remember, you can ask me anything, and have a great day.